Yeah, I think we're ready. So Eva was here a little bit back,
she
right?
stayed with me for 10 days.
Okay.
Were you here when she was a student? No.
No.
That was many years ago.
But I found a little clip. I was going through the archives, a little clip of her and her sister singing in Quechua in front of the McKinney building. And I think Bob Croft recorded it. And I cut that little clip out, just a little bit of them saying, hey, this is Eva and my sister, and we're going to sing, or I don't know which one of them was talking. And then they sang the song. And I posted that on Facebook.
Oh.
And I think like more than 40,000 people saw it
Wow.
in South America. It was our first video that just exploded on
Wow.
Facebook.
Oh,
and
because
it's just very short, very simple, but a lot of people identified with it, and people started tagging them. People started saying, hey, Eva, look, this is you. And I'm like, oh. And so I got to talk with them just a little bit through Facebook Messenger, you know. And I don't know if you know Andy Chuki. He's from Ecuador. He's a young student right now.
No.
So I guess when Eva and her sister, what is it?
Lanchimba.
Lanchimba. And what's her sister's name?
Jeanette.
Jeanette. Okay. When they were little, they were at Andy's church when his dad, I guess, was younger, and he remembered them, and that's why he remembered. He said, Andy, you should go study there at Rio Grande Bible Ministries, or Rio Grande Seminario Bíblico Rio Grande, and yeah, so there was kind of a connection there. And then Andy had been trying to connect with them in Ecuador for the last 2 years or something like that, and never able to. And then all of a sudden, she pops up here, and he's like, "Hey, you're the person I've been trying to meet." So
The whole thing is just wonderful. I don't know if you know all of her story.
just a little bit,
Her husband left her after 15 years of marriage. And when she wrote me and asked if she could come and stay with me, I said, sure. I said, but 10 days, you're going to be bored just sitting around with me. What, for 10 days, what would you like to do? I said, would you like to share your story, maybe with the girls in the dorm? And she wrote back and said, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But when she was here, I invited Sharon Mitchell over. I wanted her to meet her. And so as they were talking, and I didn't say anything to Sharon, all of a sudden, she was giving her life story, and Sharon said, Eva, I would like you to come to speak to the girls in the dorm. And at first she said, no, I don't think so. But before Sharon left, she said, okay, I'll do it. And she did. And there were 27 girls there that day.
Yeah.
And she just told them her whole story. And it was wonderful. And then the girls invited her to go to lunch with them because it was right before lunch.
Okay.
And then she came up here. She told me she met you.
Yeah, she came. Andy, I guess, went and met her in the cafeteria and brought her over here. And we're like, would you do a podcast with us? She's like, sure.
Yeah.
So we got to hear a lot of her story, some of the part of her coming and then serving, and yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just amazed at her. Because when they came, Fran, now, did you know Fran Nickel? Was she still alive?
No, just before we got here.
She died in 2015. Well, she was once the women's dean.
Oh, okay.
And was the dean when Eva and Jeanette came. And they were so different, you know. They were straight out of South America. And that's good. They wanted to room together. They had never been separated before. And Fran
They were
said,
pretty young, right?
They were, yeah. Fran said, well, you're going to have to room with other people. And they both started crying and said, oh no, please don't separate us. We've never been separated in our lives, please. And so she gave in and she said, okay, for the first semester you can live together, and after that you'll have to have other roommates. Well, they got to know Fran, and through Fran I got to know them, and they were just special.
Okay, so Enid, what was your job at that time? What were you doing here?
What was I doing at that time? Probably working with Keith Anderson, who was the registrar.
Okay, all right.
I worked with him for 10 years. Yeah, I think that's where I was then.
Okay.
I can't remember what year that was. I started out working with Bob Croft.
Okay.
I worked with him for 10 years. Then Russ Hobbs was a new president, and I knew him from church, so he asked me if I would be his assistant. But he resigned from being the president after 3 years. So I was his assistant, and then he moved up to the Thompson building and was the academic dean. So I worked half-time for him and half-time for Keith Anderson, the registrar, until Russ left, and then I worked full-time for Keith. So I worked with him for a total of 10 years. And then I said, I never wanted to stay in one job very long. After I kind of conquered it, I wanted to move on to
the next challenge.
Okay. And I should say, during most of those years, I was working on the publications as well.
Right, that's the job I know you as helping with the editing, the magazine articles, and a lot of the text that goes out, making sure it is communicating the message we wanted to communicate, right?
Yeah, the prayer calendar, which we didn't have when I first came on staff, but we started it soon after that. And the Intercessor and the magazine,
Yeah.
So then, back in 2016, I think, I moved back to the Elert building, the old office building.
Oh, okay.
And just worked on the publications. And then they were going to knock that building down, so we had to get out. So I said, well, I think I'll just work at home.
Okay.
So that's what I've been doing ever since.
Okay. All right. Enid, I know you could tell us stories, so many different stories of over the years, over the decades. You've been in charge. Were you the one that put together some of the books of the
Yes.
of the 40 years and I don't know if it was 50 years of Rio Grande Bible Ministries, which then was Rio Grande Bible Institute,
Right.
which is still our legal name, but now we say Rio Grande Bible Ministries because of the family of ministries that we have here. But you were in charge of, or had that project of kind of telling the story of everything that's happened, what the Lord's done. But before we go there, today I want to hear more of your story. I want to know where you came from, how you got here, what the Lord has done in your life. The mission of this podcast is to hear how God has done miracles in each and every one of us. And that we all, some people have the temptation to look at other people as the superheroes of the faith, There's young people who would look at you and wow, you've been here so long, you've done so much. But from your point of view, I think, and from each of us, no, it's no, I'm a normal person, but God has worked in and through my life. So that's kind of our mission. So we want to hear, how did you come to know the Lord? Because that's kind of the first big miracle the Lord does in us, right? Changing our lives, and then also, how did the Lord bring you here?
Well, since I'm so old and it's a long story, I don't know how much time do we
may
have.
only be able to hit the highlights today.
Okay. Well, I was not raised in a Christian home.
Okay.
My father died when I was 11. He was a farmer, northern Minnesota. He died. My mom sold the farm. We moved to town. My mother, her mother, my sister, and I. And I was just entering junior high school, so it was a big difference, much bigger school. Things were so different. All the girls that I met had boyfriends. Where I came from, we hated the boys, and the boys hated us, in 6th grade. But these girls were all talking about their boyfriends, and I thought, this is weird. Anyway, to back up a little bit, we were not a Christian family, but thanks to a neighbor who used to pick my sister and me up and take us to Sunday school, I did hear about the Lord. And one night in a special meeting, I had raised my hand to accept the Lord, but nobody saw my hand, so nobody talked to me about it. Then we moved to town, and it was a totally different life. And we did start going to a church, a good church. And I just thank the Lord for the different pastors that I had over the years, because they took an interest in me and helped me. And I finally really came to know the Lord at a camp the summer between my last 2 years of high school. I had never wanted to go to camp before. I thought, that's sissy stuff. I don't do that kind of stuff. But a friend of mine kept after me, and I went with her, and I was so glad I did. The verses in Isaiah that really touched my heart were the camp pastor that week was talking about when the Lord said to Isaiah, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And he said, here am I, send me. And I said that night, and I didn't know what it meant, where the Lord was going to take me, how he could use me. I didn't feel like I was any special person. But I finished my senior year of high school, and then I should say my older sister, 3 years older than I, had gone to a Bible college up in Canada, Prairie Bible Institute.
Okay, can I ask you a couple questions? What made your family start going to church? Because you said you weren't going to church.
A neighbor.
So when you moved into town?
Another friend of my mom's was a Christian and went to that good church.
And so your mom started okay, and so you started going, because at some point it sounds like you started going as a family to church.
Well, yeah, off and on. We were not very regular.
Okay.
Any of the three of us, my sister, I, and my mom. My mom had to find whatever job she could find. The town was only 3,000 people. So she did all kinds of different jobs.
But your sister came to know the Lord as well.
Yes, actually before I did. And she told me, you should go up to Prairie with me to the Bible college in Alberta. And it just seemed right. I don't think I even prayed about it. I just knew that was what the Lord wanted me to do. Okay.
And that's after high school?
After high school.
Okay.
And turns out I stayed there for 21 years.
Okay.
I graduated from Prairie in 1967. They invited me to stay on the staff. And there I worked with the registrar and director of admissions. And then she had to retire after a few years, so I took over that job.
Oh, wow.
2 jobs.
That's a big job.
It was, because we had 800 students at that time. And every summer we would get about 200 applications from new students. And
so you were a registrar and admissions?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And this was before computers. And I was typing on an old typewriter. And it was during the Vietnam War. And so a lot of Americans were escaping to Canada and different countries to get out of the draft. So whenever we would accept an American guy, we had to send a whole bunch of papers to the U.S. government saying that yes, indeed, we have accepted this.
Okay, he's
man
not just
as a
trying.
student.
He's not just pretending to get out of the draft.
Right.
Okay.
So we had to do all these carbon copies. I remember just typing all these carbon copies, and then if you made one mistake, you had to go through all the carbons.
Oh, and correct each
correct.
one.
It was quite a job. Anyway, she had to retire, so I took over those 2 jobs, and it just about drove me crazy. So,
But you were there for 20 years.
well, in that job for only 2 years, and I said, I can't handle this anymore. You've got
Okay.
to split these 2 jobs up.
Even here, those are 2 totally different people running those jobs, and we only
Right.
have 150 students at most, right?
Yeah, and it was a big job. So I realized I couldn't do it, and so the administration agreed, and so then I just took the applications.
Okay, so doing admissions, the
Admissions.
admissions department.
Right.
Okay.
And then they asked me to teach English. I had always loved English, and we all had, when we entered school there, we had to take an English test. And if you did well enough, you could get exempt totally. If you did pretty well, you just had to take 1 semester a year instead of 2. And the first year I had to take both of them, and I didn't like that, but anyway, I did it. And so anyway, I started teaching English, and I taught English to freshmen for 13 years, I think
Oh,
it
okay.
was. And I grew to love that more than doing admissions because I got to know the students, and we had a lot of fun together, and I would have them give their testimony in the class sometimes. And while I was there, we had a real revival on the campus. The Lord just worked in our hearts, and it was a wonderful thing. This last revival last year at that college in Kentucky, it reminded me of that.
Okay. We're just spending time together, hearing the words, singing, not scheduled, just around the clock,
And
coming together.
sharing what the Lord was doing in our lives. And I always remember when we finally went back to class. I mean, we didn't have classes for the better part of a week. And when we finally did go back on the next Monday, I just felt like we need to share what the Lord's done for us in this little class. There were only about 25 students in it. And I'll always remember this guy. He was from somewhere in Europe. I can't remember the name of his country. But he raised his hand and he said, Miss Sanford, do you think it's wrong to be proud of your country? And I said, no, I don't think. He thought that was a sin. Maybe he should
I mean,
confess that.
I think it's a good question, because I think we can take our country pride too far sometimes, but yeah. Okay, so and so you were there, like, around about how old were you when the revival happened, and in that period?
That was in the late 70s, so I was born in 45, so I was getting up to my late 20s, early 30s.
Okay. And then so you had pretty much almost a full career there. What changed?
The Lord. Oh, this is a long story. I'll try to make it short. We used to have a week-long missions conference at Prairie every spring, just before everybody left. And
A week long.
A week long.
So like from Monday to Friday, or what?
Sunday to Sunday
Oh, wow. At the Bible College.
at the Bible College.
So like our missions conference right now goes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Maybe we should recommend they extend that.
Well, it was a wonderful time, and we had like 3 meetings a day. Plus, there was
Did you have Did you invite in missionaries to share?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of them,
Wow.
different ones, because a lot of them were graduates of the Bible college.
Did you have main sessions?
Yes.
And then like breakout sessions?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And also, there would always be a special speaker for the main morning session. And then in the afternoon and evening, it was more missionaries speaking, telling about what they were doing and saying, help, we need help.
And we need more workers.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Right. So I had talked to an elderly missionary before that, before the end of the school year of 67, I think. And I told him, I said, I've been working here so long and we're sending out all these missionaries, but I've never been to a mission field myself. And he said, you should take a year off and go somewhere and just help a missionary for a year.
Wow.
And so that stuck in my head, and I thought about that for a couple of years. And then, do you know who, oh dear, I just wrote about him in The Intercessor. The founder of OM.
It's Operation Mobilization.
George Verwer.
Okay. No, I don't know his story.
He was an absolute unique person that God used in so many people's lives. Well, he used to come to Prairie, and he was a very good friend of Mr. Maxwell, the founder of the school. He was bombastic, and he was speaking at the Bible conference, missionary conference. And he said, some of you have been here a long time. Yes, I was listening. And your head is just getting full of facts and full of the Bible, and your head is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you don't get out and do something about it, your head's going to explode. And I said, oh, Lord, that is me. I know. I know he's talking to me. So I went back to my apartment that night. I sat down on my bed and I said, okay, Lord, I know you spoke to me tonight. I'll go. I'll take a year off and go somewhere. But where do I go? I've heard all these missionaries all week. Help us in Japan. Help us in Latin America. And I thought, well, who are some of the first missionaries I ever heard of and knew about? And it was Fran and Chalita down in Saltillo, Mexico. Fran had worked with my then pastor in Minnesota. And she was a nurse and a nurse's instructor in Saltillo. And Chalita was a Mexican doctor, pediatrician, and they worked together. Both of them worked in Saltillo in the city. And then on the weekends, they would go out into the mountain villages up higher in the mountains, these little, poor little villages. And they would have a clinic and help the people, and people would come from like 20 different villages in the back of pickup trucks and ox carts and all kinds of things for their attention. And I thought, okay, maybe that's where the Lord wants me to go next year. So I wrote to my pastor, asked him what he thought. He said he thought that was a good idea. Chalita wanted to learn English. Maybe I could teach her and some of her relatives English. Plus, I could go out with them and help in their ministry. So that's how I ended up in Mexico.
Okay.
That's how I got to know Fran and Chalita. I lived with Fran. She lived across the street from Chalita and 4 of her sisters and their kids. Chalita was a single gal. And I just loved it. I went there in the summer of 81. Fran got very ill during that time, and we left in February of 82. I was due back at Prairie in the summer of 82 to start teaching again in the summer session. So Fran decided to go with me and get a rest. But we didn't get a rest because we were visiting all her friends in Michigan. She was from Michigan. and her home churches and people. And then we went to Minnesota, picked up my mother, who by that time was in her 70s and still didn't know the Lord. Oh, we bought a car in Canada, drove down to Minnesota, picked up my mother, took her up to Canada, to Alberta. Fran led her to the Lord one night while she was there.
Wow.
And my mother's story is too long to share, but she had a very hard life. Then, after 2 months, my mom and Fran left. Fran went back to Mexico. Mom went back to Minnesota. I stayed and started teaching English again. Then Fran started calling me and writing me and said that things were shutting down for her in Mexico. Did I think there was anything she could do at Prairie? Because while she was there for like 2 months with me and my mom. She had gotten to know a lot of people there, and she had gotten to know the head of the, what do you call him, who would accept new staff.
Okay,
And
like head of personnel?
Personnel, yeah. And so I said, well, I don't know if there'd be a place for you. She said, well, I'm a nurse, I could work in the infirmary. They had an infirmary. So I asked him, and he said, yeah.
Okay. And what happened in Mexico that the ministry shut down there?
No, thankfully, there were other people to take it over.
Okay.
And Chalita continued to go for a while. So, make a long story short, Fran came back.
Okay, came to Canada.
Came to Canada, worked there as a nurse on the campus. But I know she was itching to get back to her Mexican people, or at least people that spoke Spanish. She had forgotten a lot of her English over the years.
Where did she learn Spanish?
In Mexico, after she got there, in nurses' college.
Wow.
That's a whole other story.
Okay.
So anyway, we stayed there at Prairie then for 2 more years, but she was starting to get itchy. She wanted to go back. And so she pretty well made up her mind she was going to leave. And I thought, again, after I had done certain things, I wanted to move on to something else, but I didn't want to leave just because Fran was leaving. I had to know. So I went to Ted Rendell, whose name you might recognize as the man who gave us those thousands of books last year.
Oh, okay.
He was.
That was his personal library,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, he had been my Bible teacher at Prairie.
Okay.
Then when I went on staff, we worked across the hall from each other. He was the president for a while.
Okay.
And so I went to him for some advice, and I told him, Fran's planning to leave, and I'm thinking about it, but I don't want to leave just because she is. I have to know from the Lord that this is his will. And he said, well, I think it's a good idea. He said, personally, I don't believe in missions sending their single missionaries out alone. He said, after all, the Lord sent them out 2 by 2. And I said, oh, I never thought of that. So that was my answer. So we started working on leaving. We didn't know where we were going to go.
Let's take a little pause right there. Okay, so we're in the middle of leaving Prairie. Oh, we completely forgot to start our timer. Okay, we'll pretend we're about halfway through. Hey everyone, Billy Jackson here. This is our podcast Entre Hermanos, and that means between brothers. We want the brothers and sisters of Christ hearing the stories of what God is doing to prepare future pastors and missionaries for His church. That's what we're trying to do. So if you enjoy the stories, share this podcast with others and have so that they can hear what God is doing around the world. And we hope that to grow and get better in telling these stories, and we hope that you will be able to enjoy them and praise the Lord for what He is doing. That's about 15 minutes. Normally we do three turns.
Okay.
Okay. So So at that time, lots of missionaries were going out from North America, the U.S., Canada, all over. And there was, the missionary strategies have evolved over the years. So back then, it did feel like people went out individually or as like either as singles or a family, and they were alone a lot.
Right.
I don't know. And you heard from a lot of missionaries. What were do you remember? I guess I'm kind of thinking a lot of the missionary stories you hear, like they were out in a little village or mountain or a jungle or whatever. And nowadays, just what the brother told
Mr.
you. Who is it?
Ted Rendell.
Ted Rendell. Saying that going in pairs or in teams, the missions philosophy today is, no, you need a team so that you don't burn out or you don't, just so you're able to continue on the work. Yeah. And if one person goes down, that doesn't mean that there's no witness there anymore. So I don't know, maybe that's just something the Lord's taught the church in the process over the years. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, because I think it was especially difficult for single women alone. I mean, I can't imagine all the things they faced.
And there's been a lot of singles and single women that the Lord has called to the mission field over the years. It's there's a lot of amazing stories of single women being used by the Lord.
Right.
But yeah, I guess, why did we think at some point it was good for people to just go on their own? Or maybe there was just no one to go with them, and they were like, no one will go, I will go. Maybe.
I think that was it. But I was not the type to just go out by myself. And so I was still praying about it, thinking about it, when Paul Maxwell, another friend, he actually became the president of Prairie after Mr. Rendell did. After or before. Anyway, he was the son of Mr. Maxwell, who started this school.
Okay.
And we were at tea time. In Canada, you don't have coffee breaks, you have tea time.
Okay.
We had tea time every afternoon. All the staff who wanted to go to the cafeteria.
Was coffee an option or only tea?
Yes, you could have coffee, but I never liked coffee all the time I was in Canada, because my mom always made tea at home for some reason. Anyway, it was at tea time one day, and I'm telling Paul, well, it looks like Fran and I are going to be leaving. Well, what are you going to do? Well, we're not sure. We think maybe we'll go down to Texas somewhere and work with Hispanics. He said, you're going to minister to people that speak Spanish? He says, you better go to that language school down in Edinburgh, Texas, and learn Spanish first. And I said, oh no, I don't want to go to another school. I've been teaching all these years. But he put that seed into my mind, and I thought, yeah, he's right. My sister had come here to language school.
Now, your older sister that said, hey, come to Bible college,
right,
then also came here.
Right after she graduated from Prairie, she came here in 1964.
Wow.
She never ended up going to the mission field because she met a man who wanted her for his wife, and they settled down in the States. But so I had actually visited here one time.
Okay.
In the heat of August with my sister, and I said, who would ever want to live here? It's so hot. Little did I know what the Lord had in store for me. Anyway, yes, I took Paul's advice. We applied. Actually, Dr. Johnson, who was the president at the time, remembered my sister, and when he saw my application, and I guess I had to give a testimony of what all I'd been doing and everything, he said, oh, since you're an English teacher, maybe after you finish Spanish language school you could stay on and teach Spanish. Oh, no. So they accepted me right away. So then Fran and I came here, not knowing what we would do after we left here, but we never left. Then Dr. Johnson asked Fran if she would stay because she was a nurse and they needed another nurse on campus. So I said, well, what could I do? And he said, oh, you could work in any one of the offices. You know, you've had all that experience in that. I said, okay. So here I am.
Okay, so you did the year language school program, and then have been working, whether it be as an editor or a secretary or, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Before we go further, can you help me? There's been this relationship between Canada and Rio Grande Bible Ministries has been a mystery to me over the years. Can you help me figure that out a little bit more? Why is there this relationship, this connection? I don't know if it's specifically with Prairie because so many people have come from there, or if there's something else.
Well, I think Gordon Johnson had a lot to do with it.
Okay.
The Lord sent him here.
And he was from Prairie?
And he was from Prairie.
Okay.
Years before I did not know him.
Okay.
At all. But, and they came here in the 50s, I think, early.
Well,
50s.
he was part of the first Spanish class, right? Because he came to teach in English, and the year he came, they shut down the English school.
Right.
So I guess that would have been
late.
56, 57, something like that.
Or maybe even earlier. I can't remember the dates.
It feels like maybe he came and had 1 year, and then it's like, oh, well, if I want to keep teaching, I got to learn Spanish.
Right. Yeah. So my sister had come in 64, 65. In fact, she was here when Mr. Elert, the founder, died.
Oh,
she went to his funeral.
Wow.
And he was her teacher. He didn't speak Spanish. Never did. But he gave like a spiritual life class in English to the missionary students.
Right, yeah.
So my sister remembered him, excuse me, and she knew Dr. Johnson. So I was always aware of Rio Grande.
So just by nature of the people coming that we're serving here, having come from Prairie or come from Canada, because there's a Rio Grande Bible Ministries Canada.
Yes.
Like
in Winnipeg.
So at some point, it was even made legal and official. Like there is a support. There's a supporting organization that of Rio Grande that is officially from Canada.
Right. And I think Gordon Johnson had a lot to do with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know some of our scholarships are provided through them for the students. I know we make the prayer calendar with, a different address and logo on the back. That's the version that goes to Canada. So I know they're praying for us.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people from Prairie did come here, both as students in the language school and on staff. In fact, I was just thinking of this yesterday. One year, there were 13 of us alumni from Prairie on the staff here.
Oh, wow.
And after Larry came, they used to have us over to their house once a year and invited all the Prairie people on staff to dinner. And I remember that one year there were 13 of us. And now I think I'm one of the few that are left. Can't think of another one. But yeah, there was always a connection with Prairie.
Just because the Lord was using Prairie to send workers into the mission field in Latin America, including here at the border with
Right.
the Bible College.
Right.
Now that's another shift I've seen, just from being able to hear the stories of missionaries and see what's happening today. Not only there's this the shift of, okay, we need teams of missionaries is healthy when we can, but also for a few decades there was this hundreds of missionaries going to South America, and now that's kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And now South America is starting to send out their own missionaries. So it's almost not exactly reversed course, but there, it has changed a little bit. Like, I don't know, in the language, and when you were in language school and afterward, about how many language students were there?
Well, when Fran and I first came here, for me to go to language school, there was no room on campus for us to live.
Wow.
We lived out by Bibleville
Okay.
on Eldora Road out in the boondocks for that first year.
Okay.
And then when we were accepted on staff, there still wasn't any apartment available for us right away. So we lived in a winter volunteers little mobile home for a few months, and then finally Dr. Johnson's wife, can't think of her name, she was in charge of finding us a house. Finally, she said we could live in one of the student apartments.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, to answer your question,
Yeah, about how many?
when I was in language school, there were 65 or 70 of us in my semester and 25 to 30 in the others. There were
Wow.
like almost 90 of us in language school.
Wow.
And
And that was like a normal class size for quite a while, right? That there would
for a
be...
while, that was one of the larger classes, and then
Okay.
it sort of started going down. And the Bible school started going up.
How many Bible school students are around the house
Probably,
with it?
there weren't 90, there may have been 70.
Okay, I didn't realize that part was lower. I thought they were both
was.
just around 100 or so.
Well, it varied from year to year, but it started going up in the Bible school and going down in the language.
And nowadays, if we had a class of 10 language students, that would be a big class right now for us.
Right.
So there's just not as many. And those that are going, a lot of times are support role, whether they be missionary pilots or Bible translators or helping the local churches reach the more hard to reach indigenous, like mountain areas and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another interesting shift. To me, it's really exciting, the part where the Lord's calling Latino missionaries to reach other nations.
It's wonderful. It's a completely different thing from when I came. Of course, when I came, we were not accredited. We accepted students who hadn't even graduated from high school. In fact, do we have time for one more story?
Yeah.
One year, back in the late 80s maybe, a girl who was helping two missionary translators who used to come up to Edinburgh. They lived just north of town. They brought this little gal from, I want to say Oaxaca, Oaxaca, to help them in their translation work. Well, they decided she should come to Bible school. So they brought her over to talk to the director of admissions. And the fact was that she'd only had 7th grade. But she was very intelligent. Her name was Viviana. And so we got to know her through these two missionaries. Somehow Fran had a connection with them. The director of admissions at the time said, no, she's only had 7th grade. It's just not going to work. Well, they came back and begged him again. He said, okay, for one semester, but if her grades are low, she can't continue. Well, bless her heart, she was from a little village. She had customs that were so different. When they put her in the dorm, she had to learn to sleep in a bed because where she came from, they slept on the floor. So she had all these things. Anyway, Fran got to know her because she was then the dean of women. And Viviana would come to our house and cry and cry and cry on our shoulders because it was so hard. But she was smart, and she made the grade, and they let her stay. She graduated. She went back to Mexico. She went to Mexico City, graduated from high school. Make a long story short, she's been working as a translator all these years. She met a guy and they're married. They're both working as translators in Mexico. One day she wrote us and asked us to pray for her. Now you're going to faint because I almost did. When she told us she'd been invited to speak at the United Nations in New York City.
Wow.
About women and women's needs. I could not believe it. Little Viviana from Oaxaca speaking at the United Nations. About 5 years later, she went back and spoke a second time.
Wow.
What the Lord did for that girl.
Is she still in Mexico City?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
She got married. They never had any children of their own, but her husband had a niece and nephew who needed to get out of the homes they were in, and they had been living with them in Mexico City.
That would be really cool to meet them someday.
Oh, I hope they can come back and visit me. They do every once in a while.
Okay, if they do, you let me know.
I
want to
will.
get their stories.
Oh, and he is now the head of an organization that works with translators from all these different tribal groups. And she works right along with him.
Wow. Interesting. I wonder who he works with, because we have Greg Fink working with Wycliffe Seed Company, which is the part of Wycliffe that works with native translators.
No, it's not with Wycliffe. It's an organization that the Mexican translators formed of themselves. They're related to Wycliffe somehow, but
right. Well, see, Wycliffe Seed Company is not the Wycliffe translators. It's we're going to give native translators the resources they need to complete their projects. I was just asking him the other day, what's the difference between Wycliffe Seed Company and Wycliffe, and why are there two different? Okay, so for many decades, it was Latinos coming, lots of Mexicans, I think. Like nowadays, there's more from South America than Mexico, but many Latinos coming, getting the training they needed to go back and plant churches, pastor churches, teach women, children. When did you first realize or start to notice that there are Latinos now going to non-Spanish speaking countries as missionaries?
very recently.
Okay.
I would say in the last, I don't know, 6 years or so. Little by little, the Lord was just speaking to them, maybe through our Bible conferences or just on their own, hearing about these different countries and their needs, and maybe from missionaries. I don't know. It was it's just the Lord.
It's something the Lord is doing.
Yeah.
That I guess we didn't, obviously wasn't something we dreamed up.
No.
But they're going, one of the most exciting parts to me is their heart for Muslim countries, Anglo or white missionaries have tried to go for many years and have gone, but with limited limited success, at least as far as like there being established churches and stuff.
Yeah.
And so just watching to see what the Lord's going to do now with this new generation of missionaries.
Yeah, it's really wonderful when I see our students where they're going in the summertime, and even on breaks, you know, they're just it's the world. It's no longer Latin America, just Latin America. Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring it back to you now. You've been able to see the Lord's faithfulness in saving you and your work over at Prairie and here. What encourages you to know that the Lord is faithful, that this life lived for Him is worth it?
Well, yeah, just my experience as one little kid from a farm in Minnesota. You know, how I was thinking of that. Someone asked me the other day, Enid, how did you know how to make changes in your life? How did the Lord lead you to do that? And I said, at first I said, well, I just knew in my heart that this was what He wanted me to do. She said, she didn't really accept that. She said, but how did you know? And then I said, like, when I went to see Mr. Rendell, and when I talked to Paul Maxwell, when I called my former pastor and asked him about going to Mexico, it was people the Lord used in my life that were my ministers or my friends who had an influence on me. Through them, the Lord confirmed what I was already praying about. So He used people. And in recent years, when I came on staff, I had $30 a month promised to me by one supporter who had been a former student of mine at Prairie many years before that. And he was a missionary in Japan.
Oh my.
And over the years, how the Lord has supplied my needs financially has just been amazing to me.
Did you go out and do deputation and stuff in the summers?
Finally, we did. Fran and I always went together. She had supporters up in Michigan.
Okay.
Very faithful supporters. Some of them very well cared for supporters because of the automobile companies and so forth that they worked with. So she had good support. And of course she shared her support with me in those first years when I didn't have any supporters. I think it was after 3 years we finally went on our first trip.
Okay.
Up to Michigan, Minnesota. Years later we went all the way to Prairie several times.
Okay.
They were supporting me from Prairie, a women's group. They still pray for me.
Yeah.
Just the Lord's faithfulness in that. And then when I turned 65 and was able to get Social Security, and then come to find out I had never thought about getting anything from Canada. But a friend of mine told me a long time ago, she said, Enid, when you turn 65, be sure to check out the Canadian Social Security. I said, really? I didn't even know they had such a thing. She said, yes, let them know. So I can get Social Security from Canada and the United States, plus my faithful supporters. And that has enabled me to help support some of our graduates,
Oh, yeah.
some of other friends, and be a part of them, of their ministries, which is a blessing because I'm getting older. I can't go out and go to any other places and do things. But the Lord never gives up on us.
You know, you're asking about the friend asking, when did you know to change? But I feel like today it's more normal to change and hop around than to stay put and stay faithful. That's something that's not as normal today, to stay faithful, to continue on, and be satisfied with the work in front of you. What made you happy to stay here once you were here?
I just felt that the Lord brought me here in such a very direct way. I've never wanted to leave. I just enjoyed, getting to know the students, although I don't know them as well now as I used to. But seeing what the Lord's doing here, and He's just confirmed to me that He has a work for me yet to do. I really love writing and working on the prayer calendar and the magazine especially. And it's a blessing to me to have something that I can do in my old age.
Yeah, to be part of something that's bigger. That's our theme for the staff retreat this coming summer. I'm on the staff retreat committee team trying to help plan it. So it's something like en el lugar correcto, en el lugar. Something. The theme, the idea is like you're in the right spot to be part of something bigger. You're a puzzle piece that is something bigger that the Lord is doing, and that's how I feel about this place. Is that we get to enjoy seeing something a lot bigger than just ourselves that God is doing. Right. And we get to have our little part, that what our contribution, the part that the Lord has given us to do. Yeah. So, because media is very much a support role ministry. We're not planting churches. We're not going out and doing evangelism. We're trying to help give a voice to the Bible college and to radio through pictures and videos and stuff. Right. So it's very much the same. Like, my ministry wouldn't matter if it weren't for the whole family of Rio Grande, being here. So.
Yeah, we all have our little puzzle pieces to fit into the bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
The bigger picture.
All right, we're almost out of time. I have 2 more questions. Okay. What was the hardest part of your life that the Lord brought you through? What would you say was there ever, have you ever had, you felt like a moment of crisis or doubt or just a hard period of life that the Lord brought you through?
Probably my father's death. He was only 58 when he died. I was 11. And then all the changes that came after that, to my mother's life, to our life, moving, new school, making new friends, fitting in.
Yeah, so that I can easily see that being like the hardest, most traumatic part of life. How do you believe the Lord was faithful even through that
to lead us to people like that friend of my mother's that invited us to go to church in the town. And then there was a lady who kind of took me under her wing. In fact, she wrote a poem, which I can't find anywhere anymore. She wrote a poem about my family and how the Lord had worked in my family. And just older people that took an interest in me as a kid.
Yeah, and the Lord just leading you to those people and leading them to you. And you know, something interesting, we think back and we think of how the Lord blessed us or took care of us through different people that shared truth and took care of us and stuff. And we think of how they were such a blessing to us. And but you know, it is a blessing to get to be the one the Lord uses to care for others. So it's like that was a big part of their life too, a lot of times. Or now, like for us, being able to take care of others, that's meaningful to us, not just to them.
Yeah.
And then, what would you say has been one of the biggest joys in your life that the Lord has given you?
I think being here and at Prairie as well, and getting to know the students, and then seeing them go out to serve the Lord, and then hearing from them sometimes years later, like that boy that raised his hand and asked if it was wrong to love his country. I'm still in touch with him and his wife.
Wow. Where are they?
They are in Canada.
Okay.
He was from, I want to say Denmark, one of the smaller European countries.
Okay.
But the Lord is still using him. He's a Bible teacher and he goes to different countries and serves the Lord. And various ones, some from here that I'm still in touch with often. And girls like Ava, just being a part of their lives and seeing what God is doing through them today.
You know, I said that was the last question, but do you have a favorite Bible verse?
I thought you were going to ask me that. So I thought,
I don't always ask, but or one that you really like, even if it's not your very favorite.
well, I have a lot of different ones, and I can't always remember the reference. I can just remember the verses. But I looked this one up. Proverbs 3:5-6.
Okay.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And that's what the Lord has done for me. He's directed my paths. He directed me to come here, and I stayed.
Yeah. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Yes. Okay, and I'll share my favorite. Goes with that. Proverbs 4:18 says, "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which grows brighter and brighter until the full day." And in the righteousness of Christ, continuing forward, the Lord used that verse almost like a promise to me that the best is never behind us. It's always ahead to when Christ comes. So,
Yeah, that's great.
hey, we didn't start in prayer. Let me close in prayer.
Okay.
Lord, thank you for my sister Enid. Thank you for all the stories she has to share of your faithfulness, but also for just the story of her life, of how you saved her, worked in her and through her. She has continued faithful to you, Lord, and faithful to work where you have placed her. And I pray that others would be encouraged by her life, by her testimony, and knowing that serving you, Lord, is worth it. And we can trust in you to make our path straight, and we can trust in you that the full day, the perfection of life and eternity is coming, Lord. And so I praise you and thank you for your goodness, for your power, and grace and love to us. I pray this in Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Can I tell you one more thing just to you? This is not on the tape, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
For 30 years after my dad died, I believed he had gone to hell. Because I knew he didn't know the Lord. But just before we were going to leave Prairie to come down here, we went back to my hometown in Minnesota and stayed with my pastor there. That was the one that connected me to Fran, Pastor Sprecher. And we went to church at my old church in Park Rapids, and this is in the summertime, and it was a tourist area, and lots of people would come
in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Okay.
And lots of people would come to church that we didn't know. But I saw this young man, and he looked familiar. I hadn't seen him for years, and it was my former pastor's son, the pastor of the little church in the country where I had been saved, I think. I'm still not sure when I was really saved, but anyway, his father had been the pastor, and the pastor had visited my dad when my dad was on his deathbed and couldn't speak because he had had a stroke. But I knew that his dad had done that, and I always wondered, did my dad have a chance to accept the Lord? So I asked this guy, I said, is your dad still alive? Because this was years later. And he said, yeah. And I said, please give me his address. I want to write to him. So he gave me his address. I wrote to him just before Fran and I left to come down here. And I think it was after we got here that I heard from my former pastor, Eastman. I wrote him and I said, I know my dad couldn't speak, and I know you must have witnessed to him in the hospital. Can you tell me, did he indicate in any way that he wanted to accept the Lord? And he wrote back and said yes.
Wow. Wow.
It still makes me cry.
Yeah.
30 years I thought he was in hell. And I loved my dad. You know, he had his faults. He had been married before he married my mom, and divorced, and he didn't know the Lord. And the funny thing was, this pastor, Eastman, he was just a wonderful guy. He was very quiet type, but he knew my dad. Oh, and I didn't tell you, one of the other tragedies, and when I was about 8 or 9, our house burned down.
Oh my.
On the farm.
Oh my.
Well, my sister and I were in school. I walked out of the school that afternoon, and a boy came running up to me and said, your house burned down.
Oh my.
I started crying, and I cried all the way home on the school bus. Anyway, my dad, in the summertime, started building a new house, and the pastor went to help, and he was up on the roof with my dad, nailing shingles on the new house, when my dad must have hit his thumb or something, and he swore. And Pastor Eastman said, what was that you said, Dewey? So anyway, he told me that, yes, that
he had shared with them.
Shared with Dad,
Wow.
and he had indicated somehow that he wanted to be saved.
The Lord is merciful in ways that we don't expect many times.
30 years, you know, and that was just before we came here. And it was such an encouragement to me that the Lord can do anything.
Wow.
And
That's a very encouraging. Do you mind if I include that?
you want me to tell it again?
No, I mean
It's still on there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I will. I can not
No,
have it be part, or I can.
That's fine.
Okay.
It just gets to me every time I tell it.
Yeah.